Hi, I'm Adri. This is Imperfectionates, and this is going to be another quick one. I have just been getting like slammed with headaches. Something about these spring like weather changes where it's like 40 degrees one day and then 80 degrees the next day, and then it's raining and then it's dry. All of that is just very bad for my body. So I've not been feeling very well, and then on top of that, I have been juggling getting my pattern ready for testnet, getting my Etsy shop ready, doing Sock Madness, and then my actual job being kind of busy. So it is just a very tiring phase of life right now, and so I'm going to lean into the short chill videos. And so in this short chill video, I think I'm just going to show you some of the yarn that I am putting up on my Etsy shop and tell you about how I dyed it. So one of the first ideas I had when I was getting into dyeing yarn was a fall-based colorway inspired by Dunkin' Donuts on a foggy morning, and which was my like high school bus stop, and it just felt like when I was trying to think of what's the like classic fall feel to me, that was it. And so there were a couple of things I did while I was trying to like play around with this, and this was my first. I scribble dyed orange and pink, but I didn't have a bottle to do scribble dyeing with, so I used a turkey baster, and so it was a little bit less scribble dyed and a little more just like splotched on. And then I resist dyed it, so I dyed it in a skein in a mix of gray and brown. However, I didn't really think about like depth of shade in relation to how much surface area of the yarn would be visible, and so I was hoping for like a lighter brownish gray, and instead I ended up with this like very dark, almost burnt looking color, and so it looks a little bit less like a Dunkin' Donuts on a foggy morning, a little bit more like a Dunkin' Donuts set on fire. And I really do like the look of this one, but in all the tests I was doing for this colorway, I decided I was only allowing myself to keep one of them, and this did not make the cut. So I like this a lot, but it was just not my favorite. It was the first attempt. And this is 50 grams. It's the only 50 gram skein that is going to be on the Etsy drop today, and it is $9. The base is Sheila's Gold, I think. It's an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, and it's a 2-ply sock yarn. Let's get my face out of there so you can see that closer up. And then I'm actually keeping my second of these attempts, but my third is this one, where I decided I wanted a little bit less of the pink and orange and a little bit more of the gray. Added some resists so that the pink and orange could be a little more like standout, and I just put it in a couple patches throughout. However, once again, me and depth of shade went wrong. So I started out by dip dyeing this in the gray and the like gray brown, but I kind of forgot that while dip dyeing only half of the yarn would be accessible, and so I calculated depth of shade as if all of the yarn would be accessible, and so it ended up darker than I wanted it. I still haven't quite figured out the best way to like arrange this into a skein to show off the little strips of pink and orange. Like, do you think you like it all in one place like this? I think that something like this works best, but let me know. And this one's dyed on the Knit Picks Hawthorne base, which is, I think it's 80% superwash Highland wool and 20% nylon, and it is also 2-ply. And this one is 100 grams, as all the rest will be. Okay, so number 3 we've got also on Knit Picks Hawthorne, something that Chemknits Creations, who I watch a lot of videos from, calls a yarn mop. It's basically just kind of like the skein you use to catch drips while dyeing, if you're doing speckling to like wipe your fingers off on, if there's any extra dye just to soak it up. And so this was dyed in that style over a couple of different dyeing things. Like, I think I did use it for this one, and then I think I used it for some swatching and some fluorescent swatching specifically. And after I had steam set it, the base was actually a lot more like bare white. But then I noticed that while I was letting it dry, it was dripping, and some of the drips were fluorescent, and so it seemed like it hadn't really fully struck. So I just like fully kettle set it, and that made some of the color bleed and spread. So it's a little bit less white with colors and a little bit more just like tie-dye blended. It is after that extra setting. It does not bleed anymore, at least in my tap water. So that's the due diligence that I'm doing to make sure that my skeins are not bleeding. And so this one is just like a really fun, true, random, like a bunch of different colors, rainbow tie-dye-esque colorway. And all of these like 100 gram skeins are going to be $18. Okay, and then I've been playing around with speckling, and specifically I do countertop speckling, and I wanted to see kind of what happens if you speckle and then kettle set and then speckle again, so you have some more like diffuse areas of color and some more concentrated speckles. And I really like the overall effect of this technique, but some dyes strike faster and some are more likely to, there's a word that's not coming to me, but like backstain, which is that like acid dyes are wash fast but not in hot water. And so when you put it back in hot water, sometimes the dye will leave the yarn and then spread. And so that happened with the Caribbean blue on this. This was not like dyed blue. This was just speckled, and then when kettle set, the blue went and backstained, while the pink that is also in it did not backstain. And I really like this, but I don't tend to be drawn towards like colorways where all the colors are in the same part of the color wheel, if that makes sense. So as much as I like can appreciate the aesthetic of this like blue, purple, and pink colorway, there's something a little too samey about it for me. And so with the leftover speckles that I'd used to speckle this one, I did this speckled colorway where I didn't kettle set it. So it can just be on that bare background. And I decided to give it a little bit more contrast to add these yellow speckled areas as well. So this one I think that you get the effect of better when it's in the skein. This is my favorite of the colorways that I'm listing for sale, but I dyed a yarn mop while I was dyeing this using the same colors, and I liked the yarn mop more. And once again, I told myself you can only save one. So this one is the one that will be going to others. And both of these ones are dyed on Nomad Snowdrift, which is one of my favorite bases for sock yarn because it's still a superwash merino nylon, but it's just like a little bit less soft than some of the other superwash merino nylons, which makes it feel a little sturdier to me. And then finally, we have two that are on the Wool to Die For's My Name is Neo Neon Nep base. These are technically not as good for socks, but also what else would you knit with neon tweed yarn but socks? So these are merino and Donegal neps, so they don't have the like nylon to add strength, but I think that it's worth it to make socks out of these because of how cute they look. I have a couple skeins of this that I've dyed for myself that I am definitely going to be making socks with. And this one I dyed because I've been trying to get like the perfect chartreuse color, and like as you can tell looking at this, I got it, except that this neon net base is a little bit more yellow toned. Like I have some greens that are drying that I dyed a couple days ago. They're probably dry by now and I need to take them down and skein them up, but I dyed like in the same dye pot on this base and then on some Nomad Snowdrift, and the green on this base is very noticeably yellower, so it does shift the color fairly significantly, but on this at least a perfect little chartreuse. And I selected this to be sold just because I've been dyeing a lot of chartreuses in this attempt in my quest to get the perfect chartreuse, and I just can't keep them all, so this one ended up for someone else to buy. And then this one was just kind of like random, like I was gonna say kind of randomly dyed, but was truly fully randomly dyed. I often do a cold process when I'm making swatches, and after putting all the stuff from the cold process to steam set, there was just a lot of leftover water and tiny bit of dye and citric acid, and I was like, I don't want to let all that citric acid go to waste, so let me dye a kind of random colorway and use this as a dye bath. But I figured because it was already a little bit of dye in that dye bath, it wouldn't be able to be something that I could perfectly replicate, and so I figured I might as well do something that I couldn't replicate. And so I used the peacock blue from my 1% dye stock, which basically I learned my first time ever dyeing that peacock blue performs terribly in a dye stock, and even just like immediately after mixing it up, the particles settle, and if you pour some out, it'll be like weaker when you first start using it and then stronger the more you use it. So you can't really get like a replicable colorway using a peacock blue dye stock unless I guess you're heating it up every single time, and even then, the first time I used it, it was mixed up with warm tap water. So it just is not a good one for a dye stock and works better if you're just going to use the powder directly. And so I haven't been really using the dye stock because I want to try to make replicable colorways. And so I was like, I've got to use the dye stock somehow. So I mixed an unmeasured amount of peacock blue dye stock with an unmeasured amount of fawn dye stock, and I think it turned into this beautiful color. I ended up with a little too much, and so I have another skein that I put in to soak up some excess towards the end of this one's dye session. And again, as with many of these, when I looked at them I said I can only keep one, and this one I like slightly less, but I do still think it's a really, really beautiful like turquoisey, slightly muted blue color, and I think both of these make very fun tweed socks. So these will all be available on my Etsy shop. And when I say will be available, they are available on my Etsy shop now, unless something has gone wrong or something has gone very right and somehow they were already all bought. But if you would like to purchase any of these, go check out my Etsy link in description. So I still have some more admin work I have to do to get everything ready. I have to calculate the actual weight of these with the packaging so I know for shipping. So I guess I should get going. I also wanted to let you know that, like I said at the beginning of this video, I've been very busy and very tired lately, and so I think that I'm probably going to be dropping down to a video every other week for the next month or so, just while I wait for the season to stabilize so I'm getting fewer headaches and while I wait for my test knit to get underway and my Etsy shop to be all established, so there's a bit less administrative stuff going on. So I will probably see you in 2 weeks. Bye.